So we all have those moments in our life where it feels like this is the fork in the road. This is the place where something profound happens. And sometimes we're aware of it when it's happening, and sometimes it's looking back and we're going, how did that shift happen? Where everything changed and it's just like I woke up in somebody else's life. And I'm certain that every one of you can look back over your life and feel as though you've lived several lifetimes while wearing this skin. And at least for me, this is true. I mean, I feel like I look back and, I can look back at the old me and I can tell her story and I can feel her pain and I can know her loss and her struggle and her triumph, but it doesn't feel like me. It definitely feels like I'm telling somebody else's story because this person now wouldn't understand how to be in those shoes. I'm not that person anymore. And so how does a change like that happen? How does a shift so big happen that you can sit in the same body, in the same place, but be experiencing a completely different world? And I remember one of those really climactic moments. I mean, I'm asked all the time, Debbie, what happened? When did you have these realizations? How did you shift? And one of the biggest moments in my life, I can tell you, I mean, besides obviously birthing my children, which really awakened me to this sense of love that I had never experienced before, this unconditional love. Those were little breakthroughs, little awakenings and moments of shift within me for sure. But one of the biggest changes, and why I always recommend that people ask themselves, who am I? How am I showing up in the world? How does the world see me? Because the biggest moment in my life was a time where I had found myself in jail. This was something that wasn't out of the ordinary for me, surprisingly, the old me. The old me lived in fight or flight, survival. That girl had been on her own since she was 15, taking care of herself. By 17, had a child that she was also responsible for. So she really was in survival mode, fight or flight, me against the world. She didn't have anybody on her team. And she was, again, responsible for this being that she loved with such power that she would do anything. And it's amazing what you do in survival mode and what you're willing to do and the way that your perception can skew your choices. And for me, that involved lots of things. I would steal diapers and baby food and, I was in survival. I did what I needed to. I learned, the hard knocks way. I was taught how to survive. And so stuck in this survival mode, I ended up accumulating a ton of tickets on my car, speeding tickets that I couldn't afford. And, it just felt like I was getting more and more buried. I mean, if I can't buy food and I can't pay our power bill and I can't even get a job because I'm too young to support us. And the only way I know to get anywhere is this story of you have to go to college to get a good job. And I'm trying to do that. And I don't have anybody in my team showing me the way. So I'm just figuring it out as I go along. And it felt like I was just getting buried, that there was no way out that I could see. It was like I slipped into this little tiny hole and it closed up over me and there was just no way to get out. And so at one of these points, I was, coming back, and I was actually on the high. I had a little bit of hope. On the high as far as not drugs, but, I'd made a little bit of money, and I was getting my son and I a new place, and, I'm in my early 20s, and I get pulled over again. And they decide to take me to jail for warrants, again, driving-related warrants. And so my son, I watch as they're trying to get him out of the car so that they could put cuffs on me. My son is freaking out. Of course, he's terrified. He's just a little toddler. He's probably 3 years old at this time. And they decide to, call somebody to take him away, and they put me in jail. And so I'm watching as my power is being stripped out from under me. And at that moment, I'm having a realization that maybe I hadn't really had before, because none of the other times I'd gone to jail had involved watching my child be taken through this experience as well. And watching that, I saw, my child scared of the police, and these are supposed to be our protectors. How do I explain to him that, the police take away bad guys? Then who am I? And all of this is just spinning around in my mind as now I'm sitting in the holding cell in King County. And, this was my first time in King County. And that was also eye-opening. King County Jail is very different than some of the other local jails. And the people that you encounter inside of the holding cell is very different as well. So here I am sitting in the holding cell with a lot of people that I felt were very different than me. I felt I had this story of who I was. And, of course, I didn't see myself the way that the police officer might see me. And I saw me as this mom who's struggling and buried and just trying to do her best. And, and I saw, honestly, the police as the enemy, these people that kept holding me down and pushing me back every time I felt like I got some footing. They were there. And this again, was the skewed perception I was seeing the world through in survival. And so here I am again in this holding cell, surrounded by people that, in my opinion, were beneath me. I had witnessed several people in my life that were very, very, very close to me as drug addicts. I had, in fact, helped them and watched them, through many experiences of overdosing and seeing what their life involved, and I saw them as powerless to this drug, and had this view of them as well as them being stuck in survival, the things that they were willing to do for that drug. And so here I am now, surrounded by a room full of these people, thinking I'm so very different. I'm not like them. Of course the police will be able to see that, and the corrections officers, they'll set me free. I'll be out of here in no time. So part of the process, the booking process, is you get put in the holding cell, they do their paperwork, and then they call you out for PR. So you get this opportunity. PR is saying that we'll let you go, believing that you will, of course, show up for your court hearing, that you're not going to run, you're not, And so I'm thinking, yeah, of course, I'll just be let out. And I get taken over to the desk, asked a few questions. And next thing I know, I'm being walked right back to the holding cell and left there. I'm like, I don't know what's happening. Within about 5-10 minutes, somebody's picking me up and taking me to a room to suit me up, do the strip search, etc., to take me and book me. And I'm just flabbergasted. Like, wait a minute, don't you see that I'm not the same as these other people? I don't belong here. And it was in that moment that it was like something inside me split, and I was able to step outside of that jail cell and look in at me through the eyes of all of these, police officers, or these people that right now are holding the power stick over me. And I could see that just like I had viewed those people close to me with the addiction, the way I could see them through my eyes as being held by this addiction and powerless, and the things that they would do for that, and that they could not see that they walked through life and probably, just like myself, saw themselves as different than the other addicts. And here I was, just all of a sudden awakened to this fact that I wasn't any different, and that was why I was here, because I had the exact same attributes. I was no different than all of these people. And is that the way I wanted to show up? Or was I ready to grab my power back, to not allow this to happen again? I wanted the world to see me differently. And so I started to ask myself, how could I do that? How could I change? What is it I needed to do to get my power back? And at that moment is when I discovered something that I write about in my book called The Karma Bank. And it's a magical story. I hope you'll tune in and hear that one. But that was a huge transformation for me and a shift. And eventually I did get my power back. I did some steps that most people wouldn't do, which is one of those things that sets me apart from the rest of the world, and why a lot of people stay stuck in that old them. Because there has to be this willingness to have a faith and move through a little bit of struggle and know that when you're climbing up the mountain, you're not going to necessarily be able to see that hole that, again, had closed up over me. There was no light. There was no way out of the tunnel. I just had to climb blindly and pray that I was going to find my way. And so this is why in my coaching sessions, in my workshops, the one thing that I'll ask you over and over again is, who are you? Who are you? How does the world see you? How are you showing up in the world? You know, one of the ways that you can tell is who's around you. Just like I was sitting in that jail cell surrounded by those people, those were my people at the time. That's how I was showing up. So who are the people you're surrounded with? Don't think that you're surrounding yourself with people, but you're different than them. That is the way the world will view you. What places are you putting yourself in, and who congregates there? How are you showing up in the world? This is so important on your journey. If you want to get somewhere new, if you want to transcend, if you want to be like me, where you can sit literally in the same shoes, free, however, of that old story, free of the story that I used to tell that it was me against the world and I was in survival mode and everybody was out to get me. I no longer have that viewpoint. And now I no longer choose to be the victim, nor do I end up in those positions where my power is taken away. So if you're going to do one thing today, ask yourself that question. Who am I? Who am I? Take a look at the people you're putting yourself around. And instead of judging them, instead of looking at them like, oh gosh, I can't believe blah, 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 say, okay, these are my people. If I want to be different, I got to find the people I want to be like and put myself around them. Thanks again. Hope you have an amazing day. Appreciate you listening to my story.